So today we're smoking a chuck roast and a pork butt. Now, I've always heard about the steaks being able to soak in pickle juice to tenderize it, so I figured I'd try it on this one. I just put it in the juice and left it in the fridge overnight. I cleaned up my mess and got right at that pork butt. I used Tony Chachery honey bacon and barbecue to inject, and it just blows my mind how when you inject it, you can see that the muscles expand like all over the place and the whole meat just kind of explodes and rises. So I'll let you just watch what happens. I ended up using about a half a bottle. Now that's more than what they recommend. They say like 1 ounce per pound, and I ended up going way over that, but that's neither here nor there. I left that in the fridge overnight, and then I pulled the steak out to work on that. I patted it dry, like you're always supposed to, and then used my favorite rub, the Traeger coffee rub. There's really nothing better than that for cow, in my opinion. So I just went all over it, and then wrapped it back up in a bag and let that sit for later when it goes on the smoker. Now I pulled my pork butt out. When you're cooking a ham, it's always a good idea to score the skin so all of the flavors and juices kind of go back down into the pig. So I figured I'd just try it with this, and it really paid off. I added salt, black pepper, and a little bit of cayenne. Not too much, just a little bit of bite. I flipped it over, and then I repeated all of that. And I also added a little bit of paprika, and then I added some brown sugar on top of that. And then the pork was ready to go onto the smoker. I will say that I kind of rushed myself on time, so I ended up bringing the smoker temperature up to 275, but I would have loved to do this at 225 for a longer amount of time. That's all right though. It turned out great. I cleaned the grill with aluminum foil and then threw the pork right on. Next, I used my leftover injection sauce, a little bit of butter, brown sugar, and maple syrup. Heated it up and stirred it all up, and that made my glaze. Once that was prepared, I went back out and checked the meat. It was up to 157 degrees, so it was time to throw a little bit of that glaze on, and then also add the chuck roast. I brought the temperature down to 225 at that point, and when the pork came up to 172 and the beef was at 137, I wrapped it all up. Sure does look good, doesn't it? I ended up throwing that sauce, the leftover glaze, in a pan and added it to the smoker once everything was up to temperature a little bit more for the last hour and a half. The pork got up to about 200 and the beef was about 190. And the sauce was looking good, so I pulled it and wrapped it in some towels. Now remember when I was talking about that scored meat? Look at that. It kind of turned into like burnt ends, just little niblets, and it was so good. Now it's time for me to pull it apart. Yes, it just fell right apart. The bones fell out of both pieces of meat, and I just pulled it all and it was ready for dinner. Now, this is probably close to 10 pounds of meat, and there ended up being 7 or 8 people at dinner. So there was leftovers, and it was well worth it. I don't know. Normally, I'm a really big fan of that chuck roast. And look how that just falls apart too. Oh, so good. I think this time, the pork definitely won. The sauce that I made, it was a little bit bitter, and it only tasted good like when you had meat on it. It didn't really taste great by itself, but once it cooled down and it was all eating time, it all came together really well. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you try one of these soon.